Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Myslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. Hello, folks. Very excited for you to join us on today's Carnivore Cast. Today, my guest is Mike Davis, who goes by @GuyInAustin on Twitter, because that's all he is, a regular guy in Austin who got tired of being sick and overweight at the age of 48 and decided to do something about it. He rejected conventional nutritional wisdom and plunged into a ketogenic diet, which enabled him to normalize his blood pressure and shed roughly 25% of his body weight in just 10 weeks without any exercise. He has maintained the weight loss for more than a year with no trouble thanks to his carnivore adjacent eating plan. He and his wife, Marnia, started a YouTube channel called KetOMAD, which I've really enjoyed and learned a ton from. And the purpose of that is to spread the word about their unusual approach to nutrition, which involves eating just one tremendously satisfying meal each day. Through tireless experimentation and interviews with other members of the ketogenic and carnivore communities, KetOMAD seeks to provide viewers with rugged citizen journalism in the age of ragged citizen science. And we'll get into some of that shortly. But welcome to the show, Mike. Thrilled to have you on.
Thanks, Scott. And that was a very warm introduction. I appreciate it, man.
Of course. Well, Mike, I think my listeners are really going to enjoy what you have to say about some of these topics. And I was very excited to get you on. How about we start with just what brought you to carnivore and the ketogenic lifestyle? We went over a bit of it in your bio, but how did you discover it? And can you talk a little bit about your health journey with regards to that?
Sure. The keto part of my journey was the most important step. It's not where I am now, but it was the sort of linchpin, I guess. And that came from my brother, and how he found it is a whole story in and of itself, but I'll cut to where I became involved. He was visiting me in Austin. He was going to pick me up for a drive across the state of Texas to El Paso to visit my parents. And I was in his car with him. And we came to my driveway, the driveway of my house, which is a steep driveway. And we started to bottom out, which is what happened to me when we first bought the house. In our sedan, we bottomed out coming into the driveway. And so he started to get that scraping sound. And he said, in the way that only a brother can say to another brother, "Hey, fat ass, get out of the car." And so I had to get out of the car, and then I was gonna watch him, like, dude, it's too steep. You're gonna bottom out. I'm only 6 feet tall. My brother's 6'5". Obviously, if I'm a fat ass, he's gonna be much heavier in the car. And yet he pulled the car in and it didn't bottom out. And that was, there's just this moment of thinking, oh, we bought this new house in Austin, and the first thing we had to buy as a consequence of having the house is a crossover SUV with a high enough suspension for me not to make my car bottom out on the driveway, not because the driveway is too steep, but because I'm really big. And I had to confront that. And that was part of the psychology of becoming sort of receptive to what was going to happen on that drive. And the other part of the psychology was that my blood pressure was alarmingly high, just ridiculous. Every time I would get my blood pressure taken, the person taking it would say, "I got to do this again." And then, "Are you on medication for this?" It just really distressed people. And so I had a real legit health concern, and then a real legit fatness concern going on in my mind for this long drive to El Paso, when my brother, who's a big fan of books on tape, decided that it was important for me to hear The Case Against Sugar by Gary Taubes. And that book is one of the most interesting books a person can read. But if I hadn't had those motivators in the back of my mind as I listened to it, I would have just thought, that's really interesting. But the fact, watching him drive into the driveway without bottoming out, and then thinking about my blood pressure in the context of everything Taubes had to say, I realized, man, I have to do something. And so that's how I got going on the way to keto, which my brother schooled me about on the drive. And so very shortly after returning from that trip, I started the plunge into keto. And that lasted for, I guess, about 7 months before I started Carnivore, which began in November of last year. And I've been either strictly carnivore or carnivore adjacent. And by that, I mean, I include some of the low sugar fruits, tomatoes, olive, that sort of thing, in addition to carnivore from time to time. Is that a pretty good nutshell? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an incredible and powerful story, Mike. And I can't imagine going through that. It almost seems unbelievable, but the fact is there's probably a lot of people in this country and around the world who have similar stories. And I'm fascinated by sort of the motivation and the spark that got you to change, and the fact that your brother was there and able to present that information to you, because what I've seen, at least with friends and relatives who have some of these types of health problems, is it really takes a catalyzing event for them to change.
I love that language. Yes, absolutely.
Even if they know what they should do, even if they have all the information, and it just takes a real kick in the butt, life-threatening, scary event that sort of shakes them to their core, to start to change. It's not like, oh, I know I should be doing this. That never really works. Can you talk about how that applied to you and how it sort of led to some of your approaches with self-experimentation and taking the plunge?
Sure. The main thing that I did realize as a consequence of that whole series of events that led me to keto and to rapidly healing my broken metabolism, and just realizing, oh my God, it was this simple for the last 18 years. It would have been this simple. Why did no one give me this information? And of course, yeah, I thought I was incredibly grateful. So what happened was I became motivated by gratitude. And I wasn't just grateful to my brother because, of course, you expect family, you expect loved ones to do that sort of thing for you. And I am grateful to him, but at the same time, he's my brother. It's what he's supposed to do. It's not what Jason Fung is supposed to do to go make people understand the value of fasting. It's not what Sean Baker is supposed to do to go out there and fight vegan propaganda. That's not necessarily part of their job description. It's what they do. And I see these people. I see Georgia E giving lectures, and I think, my goodness. These people are testifying. Jason Fung knows what it's like anecdotally for his patients to fast, and he's sharing that information. Sean Baker knows what it's like to be a carnivore and to hear from carnivores. Georgia Ede has recently come out of the carnivore closet, right? And so we get these people reporting on their own self-experimentation, and that really does, I think, quite powerfully give the rest of us the impetus we need to experiment, to give something a try. And so if it hadn't been for Jason Fung and Ivor Cummins, oddly enough, even though people don't associate him much with fasting, if it hadn't been for those guys taking their time to spread their message, I would never have dabbled with trying one meal a day. But I did. I started it. And I thought, everything they say is correct. The more meals I eat, the more meals I want to eat. If I just eat one meal and I go to sleep before the insulin crash hits, I don't have to feel hunger ever. I don't ever have to mess with it because I don't wake up hungry because I am fat adapted. So it's just that, you hear these things, you hear what people have to say about their nutritional approach, and you may think, well, that's intriguing. I wish I could read a study about that. And this is just the mind-blowingly simple part of the whole process. You don't need to read a study. Just try it. And you will very quickly determine through self-experimentation what resonates most powerfully with your metabolism and how to heal it.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. I think that's absolutely huge. There is such a thing as paralysis by analysis. Excuse me. And some of the folks you've named, some of the researchers, doctors, scientists, authors are incredibly valuable resources. But at some point, you have to start trying things on yourself, testing things, being objective and subjective about how different changes affect your body, how you feel, how you look, different markers of health. And I think that's huge. I've personally really loved following along on your YouTube channel with your Wobo experiments, your week of burger only, reintroducing certain foods, doing this elimination diet protocol. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned through that? I think that's just been so fascinating to watch.
Oh, thank you. Sure. The most fascinating thing that came out of that was that I wanted to go 2 entire months without sour cream and cheese because I just recognize I'm addicted to sour cream and cheese. And I thought that I know dairy is inflammatory and I know that it causes cravings for more dairy. I recognize these things, but it doesn't cause me a lot of gastrointestinal distress. And I thought that all I would learn by cutting it out for a couple of months was that maybe I would lose a little weight. And yet I have I've had for my entire adult life, I've had calluses on my heels, on both heels, especially on the left heel. And after a few weeks of having no dairy, my wife, and just to illustrate the point, these calluses are very sharp. I have actually cut my wife's legs open by grazing against her while we slept with my heel. That's how dry and hard the skin on these calluses gets. And what my wife noticed when I brushed up against her one night was that didn't hurt. And the callus was gone. And you think, well, you don't know. I mean, right. That's correlation is not causation. Lots of things could be going on, but I reintroduced the dairy after the 2 months and not 4 days later, the callus was back. And again, it's not conclusive proof. It's not a randomized controlled trial, but it's a pretty solid indicator that my skin is sending me a warning sign. Dude, all that sour cream and cheese you're eating, that's not having a good impact on your skin.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think that's really profound. And there's a lot underneath that. I would love to unpack that a little bit more. And you had a recent video, besides all your experiments, you have a lot of good just monologues, I think, on a lot of important topics, such as nutrient deficiencies and self-deprecation and calorie counting, that I've really enjoyed. I think you have some excellent perspectives there. Can you talk a bit about one recent one, which is the citizens-based approach, and how that contrasts with some of the messes and tangles we've gotten ourselves in with the current scientific approach?
Oh, sure. And thank you very much for the kind words, Scott. I appreciate it, especially from someone who's got the ambition to do the kind of podcast that you're putting together. And I'm very excited to listen to what you're going to come up with and to hearing from Doug Wright, an interviewee that we will have in common very soon. So the one that the citizen journalism idea actually gets right back to one of the interviews I did with Doug Wright. He was in Austin for KetoCon, and we just knew each other from Twitter. And he came to my house after KetoCon. I was hosting Amy Berger. She was using our spare bedroom, and so he drove her back to the house from KetoCon and just hung out with us and with Amy for the evening. And then he came back to sort of do an interview on what it was like to do that, what it was like to come to Austin and suddenly have a community around him. And I think citizen journalism right now, citizen journalism is capable of all kinds of wonderful things. But right now in the carnivore community, I think the thing it's going to be most effective at achieving is establishing a sense of community. Because if I understand correctly from Doug, when he was in Boston, he went with you to a Red Sox game, right?
That's right. That was a ton of fun.
And that's just, and your connection was only that you're carnivores, right? You're not like childhood friends or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's what I think, what citizen journalism can help achieve, I think, is that it can really remind people who are feeling isolated, lonely, alienated because of their nutritional program. It can remind them that there's a whole world of people out there who share their anxieties, who share their dedication, and with whom they can connect. And that's what I'm really trying to do with the KetoMAD channel through the interviews with people. I'm not trying to, as much as I'd like to interview a guy like Ted Naiman, I'm way more interested in interviewing the kinds of people I've had on the channel. And I think it's over a dozen at this point. And it's just going to keep getting, the list is just going to keep getting longer. My most recent interview was with a former school nutrition supervisor who had to leave her job because of the crisis of conscience she faced because of the constraints she was put under by the USDA guidelines. There's no way to make food with those guidelines without drowning school children in soybean oil. There's just no way to do it. So that kind of story, I think, is really powerful and is going to help turn carnivory from just a weird fringe nutritional program to a grassroots health movement, which is what I think it's clear to a lot of us that's already what it is, but I don't think that's dawned on the general public yet.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the work you're doing with those interviews, Mike. I think it's just such a stark contrast to the, institutional review board needing to get funding, grants, trying to reprove the same hypotheses over and over again, entrenched thinking that's created nutritional guidelines that clearly aren't working. With the
Absolutely
diabetes and obesity epidemic that's plaguing our country and others. So that's really exciting. And I'd love to just shift gears a little bit, because you've done these experiments, you've talked to so many folks. I'm curious, how would you help someone new get started on a carnivore or ketogenic diet? What would some of your advice be?
Well, I guess really the shortest answer to that question is start a YouTube channel, because I know this is going to seem weird, but people aren't waiting for you to save them with your information. I know you've got people in your family and you see them poisoning themselves and you think, I have a duty, just as my brother had a duty to me to come through with that Tobbs audio book. But the thing is, we're only 2 years apart and we're very close. Not all siblings are that close. And we've both, now that he got me on board, we're both trying to help my parents. And the fact is, they don't want to hear it. They're not interested. They think we're going to die soon. Might as well have some ice cream. They just don't care. And so you cannot, the reason I say start a YouTube channel is you can't help someone who's in an unreceptive state of mind. And you don't need to help the people who are in a receptive state of mind. You can, but if you're not available to help someone who's receptive to the message, someone else will be available to them. Once they're receptive, they'll find the help they need, whether it's you or not. So you don't need to feel responsible. I guess the simplest way is you don't need to feel responsible for helping individual people. You want to help people in general. And so that's why I think a YouTube channel lets you just hang the help that you have to give up on a shingle for everybody to see. And when they're receptive, maybe it's there for you to help them, but you should, I don't think that the weight of the world gets on people. And they think, I've learned so much about nutrition and I owe so much. I'm so grateful to the people that have helped me. I want to pay it forward. Look, there's this overweight person at the grocery store with their grocery cart full of junk. I can just straighten their lives out in 3 minutes. Let me come barrage them with information. That is not helpful to anyone. That is only going to, further alienate the person from the message you have, even if that person is a friend of yours, oddly enough.
I love that. I think I'm going to have to coin hanging help out on a shingle. That's great. That's really powerful. I can't agree more. I've tried to get my parents and family members to change for particular reasons and conditions that are tough for them to a lower inflammation diet and lifestyle. And it's like pushing with a rope. You just have to wait for them to come to you. And if they know that you have the knowledge and they see you getting results, I think that's really the most powerful thing you can do.
Pushing with a rope is very appropriate. Very appropriate.
And on the other side of that, Mike, it can also be challenging when you're in a food environment with family members, with friends who aren't on board with your nutritional program. And it's so great that your wife, Marnia, is going through a lot of this with you. And I'm very fortunate to have my fiance eats a similar ketogenic lifestyle. What's the challenge of doing that when you don't have that support system, when everyone around you is reaching for the bread, cooking pasta, things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And, I'm fortunate in the sense that I cannot really sympathize, not from experience, with people who are in just flat hostile home environments, right? Where they're doing keto and they're getting healthier. And not only is no one joining them or supporting them, but every day they're being subverted. Every day, everyone in their family is telling them, you're going to have a heart attack. Why don't you have a donut? That kind of environment, that is really tough. But I guess the closest thing to an insight I can offer here is that start with what you have in common with the people that you share a household with, whatever it is that you have in common with them. And just try to build a rapport from there. Don't build a menu from there, right? Don't use that as a springboard to get them to eat more the way you eat. Respect the way they eat, but let there be a rapport between the way they eat and the way you eat. And I'll illustrate this with what Marnia and I have ended up doing. And that is, she's not giving up carbs. She's not going keto. She is certainly not going carnivorous. But she has responded incredibly to OMAD. She really enjoys not having multiple meals a day, just the simplicity that it brings to her life. So she's on board with that. So when we sit down to eat, we really have a rapport with one another, knowing that, it's been about 22, 23 hours since either of us ate. And I'm digging into my hamburger patty. And okay, maybe she's having a flour tortilla with her burrito. Maybe that's what she's chosen to do. And I still confess the smell of a flour tortilla on a gas range is an intoxicating smell. And that's tempting. But she knows that's tempting to me. And so she's going to help me talk about another subject while she's heating that thing up. And, you just get used to it over time. And over time, we've built this rapport of one meal a day into feeling like our dietary approaches are actually more similar than they are. Really, other than the feeding window, we don't have a great deal in common, but it feels like we're practically 100% allies because of the scheduling, for what that's worth.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's worth a lot. I certainly try to build rapport by bonding over, foods I enjoy and I love, talking about steak to friends and family members and in-laws, bonding over the delicious taste of bacon. Because,
easy bonding.
I don't care who you are. As long as you're not a vegan, if you're eating a standard American diet, even a quote unquote low fat, heart healthy diet, you probably still love bacon. So everyone can bond over that. But yeah, that's a great way to go about it. And, some would say the nutritional program you and I are following, is extreme. And I know you had Travis Statham on. I'm interviewing him as well, and Doug and Travis's girlfriend as well, about their
Stephanie Lowe.
Stephanie, yep, about their Good Morning America segment, which I thought was really interesting. And right off the bat, they say this is an extreme diet.
Sure. Yeah.
Why is carnivore being portrayed in the mainstream media as extremists?
Well, I think it's plainly because there are a lot of industry dollars wrapped up in preventing American citizens from seeing the difference between science and industry-sponsored consensus. I think that is, I do not know how to put it more simply and realistically than that. The media is in the pocket of its advertisers, Monsanto and Merck. Monsanto provides you with the processed food that will make you sick, and Merck provides you with the medications that will mask your symptoms. So of course they want to maintain the status quo. And as you're probably aware from exposure to my channel, I don't believe that the AHA, the American Heart Association, or the American Diabetes Association have the interests of the public at heart. I believe they serve the interests of their industry sponsors, General Mills and Bayer. So that's my take on it. Is, of course, the media is going to react to carnivory the way its sponsors would want it to. No, don't eat that way. You won't be sick anymore. We won't be able to sell you medications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a giant house of cards and a lot at play there. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just simple business and simple economics. A lot of these industries, health insurance, pharmaceuticals, exist built on the fact that a lot of people are going to be sick and having diabetes. And I don't think a lot of it is a grand scheme or some giant malicious intent. I think it's just sort of a lot of wrong decisions have built up over time, and we're left with this system that's really broken and is sort of supporting the continued poor diet, poor health of our population.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point, because I know it sounds tinfoil hatty, but what's weird is Adam Smith, author of The Wealth of Nations, talks about the invisible hand of capitalism, right? I mean, he says the market forces will make things happen, and it becomes this force that isn't driven. There's no body behind that invisible hand. It's just a force that makes things happen. And as I pointed out before, the statin industry should be worth $1 trillion by 2020. Do you think, I mean, consider how many statin commercials you've seen on television. Do you think ABC and Fox and CBS are eager to report that statins have minimal demonstrated benefit and lots of horrific side effects? Is that in the interest of Brit Hume to report? I just don't see how it is.
Yeah, good luck getting ad sponsorship after airing that.
Right.
And I'm curious to get your opinion, Mike. How can the carnivore movement, what can it do to become more mainstream, even if that is a good goal? Or how do you see it evolving? You hinted at the grassroots movement, but do you think science also has a part to play in this? How else can we get more people on board and more people healing with this type of diet?
Well, okay, that's a great question, and I do not know the answer. I wish I knew. All I can say is I'm doing my best to help with the mainstreaming of carnivory. And yeah, I don't think, I mean, I know there are people who like to be hip and trendy and countercultural and cool and good for those people, but I'm not pushing carnivory to be cool. I'm pushing it because it makes people healthy. And so of course I want it to be mainstream. I am pro human health, and unabashedly so. So I wish I knew the formula for what we could do, but what I do is I look around and I see more and more people. I don't know, maybe it's just optimism from my perspective, but I see evidence of a tipping point that we, not that one's in the future, but that we've already hit one, that a guy like Dr. Ken Berry builds a huge audience of keto fans, and then he's trying carnivore too and promoting carnivore. And so the thing is, no longer, what did that do for carnivory? Something, but it did even more for keto, right? Keto became the thing they wanted him to go back to. It's no longer this fringy, weird, alienating thing. And I think keto is a great step in the right direction. So to be a broken record here, start your own blog, start your own podcast, do something like the Carnivore Cast, start a channel on YouTube. Post stuff on your Facebook account. I'm not a Facebook fan, but if that's your thing, post on Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media platform you are addicted to. Whatever voice you have, use it to make people aware, because the thing that isn't, I think people are held up from being, or prevented from being healthy primarily because of their sugar addictions. I think that's the primary driver that keeps people going back to the standard American diet. But I think most people are strong enough to beat that addiction, to see how much damage it's doing for them, once they realize they should stop listening to the voices that are encouraging them to go back to that path. And voices like Dr. Oz, voices like mainstream corporate media, voices like every advertisement you see. All that stuff is driving you away from your health. And you have to adopt a mindset that lets you not be fazed by that garbage. And I honestly think all that we can do, those of us who have seen through the veil, all that we can do is lead by example and provide reassurance to people who are, they're frightened. They're sick, they're fat, and they're frightened because they don't know what to do. And we can help them.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really powerful. It's just changing the world one person at a time and putting the ideas out there. The first time somebody sees me eating all meat and 3 steaks for lunch, they laugh. The second time they say, that's kind of weird. The third time they say, I wonder why he's doing that.
Excellent.
And I get more and more questions. And I think it's just those questions that help people question the authorities and sort of the default truths they've been told for so many years. And that's what gets back to the self-experimentation, to the citizen journalism, to pushing the boundaries. And I think that's really powerful. I think we have a duty, if we do have this knowledge. So many people are unfortunate that they don't, because they don't have the right education, because they haven't been exposed to these resources. You don't have to, force people to try this. To your point earlier, it's not about forcing your lifestyle and your diet on others, but you do have a duty to project it in some way, to be willing to put the information out there in some way, and allow folks to pick up on it.
I love our like-mindedness, Scott. I love the fact that I've never met you, and I could have said everything you just said right there.
Thanks. Well, you mentioned something else, Mike, that I wanted to touch upon or go a little bit deeper on, which is all the folks on your channel have improved their health. And I think that's a really interesting choice of words. And I know you've spoken about this with your own experiments, and you were very successful in losing 25% of your body fat. But why does the carnivore diet help people lose weight? And when does it not result in weight loss? Maybe when is that less important?
Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, this is where I'm going to cop to being out of my depth on this level of scientific information. This is where I expect to actually benefit from your podcast, because I think you're going to delve into the scientific mechanisms behind what's happening in a much more convincing way than I can. I'm led here primarily by my gut instincts and by trying to figure out, to be completely transparent with you, I am less good at evaluating studies and science than I am at telling who's lying to me. That's what I try. I try to focus on whether the person that I'm listening to is lying to me, whether it seems to me that they're lying to me. And I don't know how people can listen to Dr. Grieger and not feel like this Weasley guy is lying to them. And I don't know how people can listen to Dr. Jason Fung and not feel like he's telling them the truth. Jason Fung might be wrong about some things, but I don't think he ever willingly distorts information. Michael Grieger might occasionally be right about something, but he is always in a calculated manner, and this just comes from watching humans tell stories, in a calculated manner, trying to distort information. So I know that doesn't go to your question. Your question was, how does the carnivorous diet help us lose weight? But what I'm saying is, I don't know. I trusted the people who told me their stories on a blog, the Zero Carb Zen blog by Esme Lafleur. That's when I started flirting with carnivory. I was reading all the testimonials on this blog, and I thought, these stories sound legit. These do not sound like made up testimonials. And so this has my attention. And so then I went out and I found people on Twitter who were real living, breathing people, who could vouch that, they were experiencing similar things. So to reiterate, I'm less about explaining the mechanisms than trusting those who've experienced them enough to try for myself and see. And since I've gone on too long there, I'll give a nutshell answer to the other part of it. Yesterday, I listened to the HPO podcast from Sean Baker and Zach Bitter with Kelly Hogan. And in it, she talked about putting on weight when she started carnivory and made the assertion, which sounds entirely reasonable to me, that a lot of women who come to carnivory from a lifetime of over-exercising and over-calorie restricting, their bodies are starved for rest and nutrition. And when they start feeding themselves meat, their bodies want to hang on to all this luscious nutrient material that they haven't had access to in abundance in forever. And so that leads to temporary weight gain. I certainly experienced weight gain after keto when I went on to carnivory. I weigh slightly more now than I did when I started carnivory. I feel way healthier. I've certainly put on some muscle. I don't know if it's enough to account for the mass, but since you're a more sciencey guy than I am, can I turn the tables on you and say, what would have been some good scientific examples for me to give in that answer?
Yeah, that's actually a great answer, Mike, and I really appreciate your humility. I think you're hiding that you probably know more about the science than you let on. But yes, I listened to that interview with Kelly as well, and I think that's an excellent example. I think a lot of people are in a state where their body needs to do a lot of healing, and that sounds kind of woo-woo, but let me take that a step further and say, when folks have been calorie restricting or eating a lot of foods that are nutrient poor, so even if it's a lot of vegetables, but for the most part, most people aren't eating that many vegetables. It's a lot of grains, a lot of processed foods, not a lot of animal protein, not a lot of green vegetables or other nutrient dense foods. When they come from that to eating only meat and eating as much meat as they feel satisfied with, their body will say, oh my gosh, we've come out of this starvation state. Please give us as much food as possible. And then two things happen. One is, which I think you probably experienced, a lot of them were under eating protein across the country. Ted Naiman on Twitter, people can find him. He has great information about how a lot of folks are under eating protein. Pretty much everyone is eating this sumo wrestler diet that's high in fat, high in carbs, and low in protein. So that's one. So once you up the protein, you're eating more meat, all of a sudden you gain lean mass, which is good. We want to lose fat, not just weight. We want to lose fat mass. And there are many reasons why you want more muscle mass. It's very important for mortality, for health, in a number of ways. But two is, if people are so nutrient poor and they're eating all this food, they're getting the nutrients, but they may also be eating a large excess of calories. And I think calories in, calories out is extremely oversimplified, but they will put on oftentimes some additional weight in the form of fat as well when they start carnivory. But that can be important because those nutrients are going to healing autoimmune conditions. There are many stories on meatheals.com and other places on the internet. Zero Carb Zen is a great one for interviews where folks have cured depression, arthritis, MS, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, lowered their blood pressure. Many of these other effects. It's about healing. And that's why when you said, people have improved their health, Mike, that I perked up, because I think that's really the first step. And then once you heal and you reverse some of those conditions, you allow your body the appropriate nutrients. Even if you're not eating less, but oftentimes it results in you eating less because you're getting the right amount of nutrition. Your body can relax and say, hey, we're not in a starvation state anymore. We can start to give up some of these fats. We can liberate fats, and induce lipolysis, start burning our own body fat. And we have the right nutrients to be in a healthy state. And then all of a sudden you spontaneously feel more active, you're exercising more. All of these things contribute. Your hormones are in line to getting to a healthier weight and an appropriate weight for your body type. But because people have this metabolic damage and these pre-existing conditions, I think it can take a while sometimes. And that's why not everyone experiences that initial weight loss.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And I honestly don't know if I would have been better off just starting with carnivory. At this point, it's an open question whether I needed to be as serious about, and I did a hardcore restricted ketogenic diet when I started keto, which I credit with healing my metabolism, because it did. I had a 41-inch gut that went down to 36 inches, and that took 4 months. The weight came off in 10 weeks, but getting my waist to where I wanted it took 4 months. And that was all on keto. That was not a carnivorous approach that I took there, and it worked. But what I don't know to this day is whether it would have been even faster or easier. It certainly would have been more pleasant to do that with carnivory.
Yeah, agreed. I think both approaches can work. If a sick person tells me they're going on keto, I'm not going to stop them and say, oh, wait, you need to do carnivore. What's wrong with you? I think a ketogenic diet is excellent. My main qualm with it would just be the low amount of protein that some groups promote. I think protein should really be at the center of every diet. I think it's really essential for bone and muscle mass.
Absolutely.
Well, Mike, this has been excellent. I'd love to just shift the discussion a little bit more to what you're doing. You've talked about this a bit earlier, but would love to just hear you talk about what are the goals for your channel? Why are you doing it? And where can people learn more about that and find more of your content?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about it, and also for letting me set up my answer with my previous answers. Really, what I want to do with what Marnia and I hope we can achieve with KetoMAD is we want to be my brother saying, hey, fat ass, get out of the car. We're there saying it all day, every day, for when you're ready to hear it, for us to be saying it. So that if you're interested, if you start digging around, you will find there are people who will lovingly tell you what you're doing wrong, because and this is the problematic part, right? When you're telling people what they're doing wrong, you're setting yourself up in this sort of hierarchical position over them, and that's not going to be helpful to getting your message across. So you want to make sure that even though you are in charge of conveying the message, that sugar you're eating is killing you, those grains are killing you, the seed oils are killing you, you're doing that wrong, stop. You want to do it not like a nagging parent, but like a friend, and so you just try a whole different bunch of rhetorical strategies and hope that one of them is the right form for the right person at the right time. And you try not to take yourself too seriously, and you try to keep yourself grounded in a democratizing effort, which is why I do respond to comments. People can easily get a hold of me on YouTube through comments. The comment feature on YouTube is horrible. It's way easier to get me on Twitter more reliably. But I do make an effort to respond to every comment that comes to my attention, which is something that I see from a number of other dedicated YouTubers. We're clearly not just out there looking to get attention. We are out there trying to build a community, and that's why it doesn't matter to me if you watch my channel, but I hope you'll imitate it and start your own channel.
I love that. I think that's a great note to end on, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and everyone should go check out Mike and his wife at KetoMAD on YouTube.
Thanks, Scott. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out, and share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.